Welcome to the RNL Revolution Nothing Less show. This is our 176th episode. Today is Thursday, November 30th, 2023. My name is Sunsara Taylor. I'm the co-host of the show, and I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, California. Andy Zee, our main host, is away in New York City this week for a live screening of the special selection of the Bob Avakian Interviews held just a couple nights ago at the Clemente Center. If you are tuning in for the first time, whether on podcast or YouTube, and to all our returning viewers and listeners, you are in the right place. This show is about bringing forward the one thing that can put an end to the seemingly endless chain of abuses that are heaped on humanity today. From the bloody slaughter of Palestinians by the genocidal state of Israel, backed to the teeth by the U.S. government, to the intensifying destruction of our planet, to the Christian fundamentalist theocracy.
I am a Bible-believing Christian. Go pick up a Bible off your shelf and read it. That's my worldview. That's what I believe.
And disgusting white supremacist, immigrant-hating, violently patriarchal MAGA fascism in this country.
On my first day back in the Oval Office, I will terminate every open borders policy of the Biden administration. Stop the invasion. This is an invasion. This is like a military invasion. We'll stop the invasion on our southern border and begin the largest domestic deportation operation in American history. I will immediately restore and expand the Trump travel ban on entry from terror-plagued countries.
The one solution to all of this and more, a real revolution. A revolution that overthrows the system of capitalism imperialism that is at the root of all of this madness. A revolution that replaces it with a new revolutionary socialist system, as laid out in the Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America. This Constitution and the new revolutionary society will enable people to go to work right away on overcoming all of these horrors and much more, with a liberating and lively culture and a whole new way of relating to each other and the planet. Unlike the U.S. Constitution, which can never do this, this socialist constitution guarantees the basic right of the people to have the fundamentally determining role in a new society and government, whose purpose and goal is to eliminate all exploitation and oppression everywhere. On this show, we follow and we promote the leadership of Bob Avakian, the architect of a whole new framework of human emancipation, a true long-distance freedom fighter, and the author of the Constitution I just spoke of. Later in the show, you will hear from him directly through an excerpt of the interviews that we did with him on this show last year, where he speaks about why it is right to want revolutionary state power and what this state power is good for. After that, we will share a clip of the talkback I did in Chicago after we held a public screening of a selection from these interviews at a major theater in the south side of Chicago, where I speak about how such a revolution could be brought about. We will also share a clip from Andy Zee's talkback following the screening of this interview in New York City just a couple nights ago. But first, Annie Day will deliver an open letter to those within the U.S. government who are acting courageously on their conscience to break with precedent and speak out and protest against the U.S. government's support for Israel's genocide in Gaza. Now, before we go to that, let me note that on Friday, November 24th, Israel paused its genocidal onslaught against the Palestinian people. As we film, this pause has been extended, with Israel agreeing to observe the truce so long as 10 hostages a day are being released by Hamas. How long this will continue is actively being negotiated as we film. But as we cover extensively at revcom.us, which we urge you to go and read, this pause does not change the fact that the Israeli government has vowed to totally destroy Hamas, the ruling political organization in Gaza. Nor does it change the fact that the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has told his cabinet, quote, "There is a lot of nonsense out there to the effect that after the pause to return our hostages, we will stop the war. Then let me make clear," he said, "we are at war and we will continue the war." End quote. The pause has not changed the fact that for 7 weeks, the Palestinian people in Gaza have been denied water, fuel, medicines, food, and other necessities of modern life. And this pause has not brought back to life the more than 6,000 children that the Israeli military has murdered. So after today's episode, go to revcom.us to dig further into the roots of this conflict, why both major ruling parties of the U.S. are and have long backed Israel through countless crimes against humanity, and what must be done about all this. With that, let's go now to Andy Zee.
To all of you within the American institutions and government who have courageously and at real personal risk signed open letters and joined protests against the savage and totally disproportionate slaughter of Palestinian civilians by Israel with full backing from the U.S. government. Your protest matters. Given the U.S. role in backing Israel, people in the U.S. have a special responsibility to call out the crimes of our own government. And many of you have expressed agony about being complicit in a genocide. Your protest against this contributes to the resistance that needs to spread into every corner of society, demanding stop the U.S.-backed Israeli genocidal war against Palestine, not in our name. At the same time, your righteous outrage against this war crime needs to go further, and it needs to go deeper to the real causes. You've been told your whole life that America is a force for good in the world. Yes, it may be flawed, but we can make it better. But is that true? Or is it a lie? A lie whose thin veneer is being shredded with every U.S. bomb dropped on Palestinian homes and schools and every Palestinian baby blown to bits. The U.S.-backed apartheid and slaughter of Palestinian people is not an anomaly to America's nature. It is a concentration of that nature. America sits atop a global system of capitalism imperialism, a system of brutal exploitation and oppression. And no, that's not rhetoric. It's a scientific description. Capitalism is a system whose oppressive division of labor today is international. This means networks of brutal exploitation of people, including over 160 million children, slaving away in sweatshops, mines, and farmlands of the Third World, all serving and benefiting the needs of the imperialist countries, with the U.S. clawing to stay on top while threatening all-out ecocide. This is enforced through violence and terror on a global scale, through 750 American military bases in over 80 countries. And in jockeying for global control, Israel plays an essential role as a heavily armed bastion of support for U.S. imperial interests in the strategic region of the Middle East. This, and not the Israeli lobby or greedy politicians, is why every major political figure gives their full backing to Israel, going back decades, and why even most of your progressive heroes are backing Israel, despite a few words of sympathy to the Palestinian dead, now numbering over 14,000, along with 7,000 missing, many of whom are buried under rubble. And this is why there's no way to change this from within. This system's mouthpieces, the politicians, the pundits, the media, they cover all this over with the lie that America's bringing freedom and democracy. And they rely on people being too comfortable with the spoils of empire, too worried about their student loans, to seriously examine what this actually rests on. As the revolutionary leader and thinker Bob Avakian said recently, what motivates Biden and the rest, what they mean by the national interests and the security interests of this country, is not concern for the lives or the rights of people anywhere, but the murderously oppressive interests of the blood-soaked U.S. empire, which they are prepared to enforce with genocidal violence and even with the danger of wiping out human existence. America is waging a global battle for its imperialist interests and trying to line you up behind it with honeyed words, democratic delusions, and the twisted notion of American exceptionalism. As Bob Avakian calls it, the GTF.
Free yourself from the GTF, the great tautological fallacy. A fallacy, an idea or way of thinking that is false, wrong, a tautology, a round in a circle way of reasoning that asserts something and then claims to prove it by merely asserting the same thing again. So the great tautological fallacy to which I am referring is the notion that America is a force for good in the world, and therefore whatever it does is good, or at least done with good intentions, even if the same thing, when done by other forces, especially by forces opposed to us, is bad, is evil, because America is a force for good in the world. Thus, in the grip of the great tautological fallacy, when one is told by the authorities and government and the media, etc., that North Korea developing a small number of nuclear weapons and a few long-range ballistic missiles poses a grave threat, one does not question. One does not ask why that is a grave threat, while the only country ever to use nuclear weapons, the United States, having thousands of nuclear weapons and the capability to use them anywhere in the world, is somehow not a grave threat.
So having freed yourself from the GTF, what are our choices? As one former 2020 Biden campaign and Biden admin staffer wrote, "Yes, I still view Trump as a fascist, but I cannot morally justify working for Biden who is supporting a massacre. And it's not just me. I know many people from the admin and the White House and campaign who are feeling the exact same way. A knowledge of how close fascism is to us, and yet a refusal to cross the moral lines of working for an administration's campaign that is actively lifting up a genocide. This is important. To get caught up in the BEB, the bourgeois electoral bullshit, and have to choose between a party of fascism on the one hand and war crimes and crimes against humanity on the other is not a moral choice. But it's also not our only choice. The real choice is not between the all-out fascism of Trump and the Republican Party or the war criminal Biden with the aggressive warmongering of the Democratic Party. The real choice is between this system and the revolution that's needed to overthrow this system. The declaration from the Revcoms, we need and we demand a whole new way to live, a fundamentally different system, brings to life that a whole different way of living is possible, a whole different way to organize society with a radically different economic foundation and political system, emancipating relations among people and an uplifting culture. All of this oriented to meeting the basic needs and fulfilling the highest interests of the masses of people. With the urgency the situation requires, we declare and demand the existing capitalist imperialist system and institutions of government in this country must be abolished and dismantled and replaced by a new socialist system based on the Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America. The revolution to bring this society into being is not just necessary, it is possible. And we are at a time when this revolution, even in this powerful country, has become more possible. Society is being ripped apart, and it won't be stitched back together on the basis of the normal way things have been, which was always full of oppression and terror. We're at a point where the crisis, the deep divisions in society can only be resolved through radical means of one kind or another, either radically reactionary, murderously oppressive and destructive means, or radically emancipating, revolutionary means. Just look at the extreme political instability that surrounds you, the unprecedented disaffection that your protests are part of, the deep divides throughout all of society. It is within all of this that there is the potential to wrench out a revolutionary future. If you and many others raise your sights to break out of the soul-crushing confines of this system, and if the forces for this revolution grow now and quickly, there is a strategy, plan, and leadership for this revolution in the Revcoms and in the revolutionary leader, Bob Avakian. So a word on this leader. Bob Avakian is completely different than all these politicians and pundits of this system, whether they're cynical hacks or seemingly sincere. All these people that you are told to look to and follow who don't see beyond this horrific system. Bob Avakian is a revolutionary. he recognizes that, quote, there's nothing more unrealistic than the idea of reforming this system into something that would come anywhere near being in the interests of the great majority of people and ultimately of humanity as a whole, end quote. Look, if you have not watched the interviews with Bob Avakian that were done on this show, if you have not dug into the Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America, then you cannot say there is no alternative to working within this system. You have no basis to argue that another world is not possible or that revolution can't be made in America. And you're denying yourself and humanity the only way out when the future truly hangs in the balance. So take the next step. Continue to stand up to stop this genocidal slaughter of Palestinians, but go deeper to understand the source of this. Dig into how this fits together with other horrors and needless suffering here and around the world, and do not stop until all of this is ended. Break out of your comfort zone and look seriously into this revolution and the new communism. Bring us your questions, disagreements, and concerns, and let's work urgently together for a whole new way to live and a fundamentally different system.
You just heard the challenge from Andy Zee to get with this revolution. That our only choices are not those presented by the fascist MAGA Trumpites on the one side and Genocide Joe and the warmongering of the Democratic Party on the other side. But that our real choice is between this system and a revolution that overthrows this system of capitalism imperialism. But what will it mean to make this revolution and to establish a new revolutionary state power? Why is this something we should want? This is a question I got to put to Bob Avakian last fall during the extraordinary 3-part interview Andy Zee and I got to conduct with him. Through these interviews that are available on our channel, you not only get to know this far-sighted revolutionary leader, Bob Avakian, up close and personal. You get introduced and brought into and struggled with to take up a deeply scientific approach to understanding the world and how it can be changed. You are invited and challenged to lift your sights to a whole different way we could be living, not just here in this country, not just among one or another section of the people, but for all of humanity. And you get a living, scientific understanding of how the revolution that can make all this possible can actually be brought about. You get the strategy for this revolution. It is difficult to overstate the dramatic, the profound positive impact it would have on the future of humanity for these interviews to be seen by tens of thousands of people and soon millions throughout society, which is why we've been hosting screenings of these around the country. And we need to build on this experience and spread these interviews much further. So after we play this excerpt from the Bob Avakian interviews, we will share a clip from the talkback I hosted after the screening of parts of these interviews in Chicago. Then we will share with you some footage we just got of Andy speaking after the film showing earlier this week in New York City, where he speaks about the struggle and the outpourings of heartfelt rage and sorrow at the genocide in Gaza and the responsibility of the revolutionaries in relation to this. Then we will share a heartfelt pitch from a member of the Revolution Club that was part of the screenings of these interviews in Oakland, California, where this Revolution Club member calls on you to throw in financially and in other ways to getting these interviews everywhere and into advancing this revolution. So let's go now to Bob Avakian, speaking to why it is right to want state power. So we wanted to start right out with asking you, you have made the bold statement that it is right to want state power, that state power in the hands of the right people and the right class is a great thing. And to wildly understate it, this is not how most people think about state power. Why is state power a great thing?
Well, you have to begin with what you referred to, in the hands of the right class of people, the right kind of state power based on the right kind of system. one reason why a lot of people may not think state power is so great is because they're living under the exercise of it by these monstrous oppressors. So the idea, the idea is promoted, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and all this bullshit from some British lord, So, people are, inclined to look at the way things are now and how power is exercised and have a hard time imagining it could be exercised in a different way by different people. And so the reason I say state power is a great thing is because in order to do all the things that we need to do to uproot all this oppression, you have to have power in society in order to do them. I mean, the reason we can't do them now is because the wrong people, that is a class of exploiters, the capitalist imperialists, have state power and use that state power to suppress any attempt at seriously uprooting all this oppression. So we need a different kind of state power, a socialist state power that, first of all, is radically different in terms of what it's based on, what it's aiming for, and also whom it involves in the exercise of state power. It's involving the masses of people increasingly in playing an initiating role and a conscious role in transforming society. And unlike the present system, socialist state power backs up the masses of people in moving to uproot all this oppression, while it also provides leadership to them to see what they're up against, what are the contradictions they have to break through on in order to uproot all this, and how to wage that struggle. So it's a completely different kind of state power. Any idea, just think about it. Any idea that you were going to overthrow the existing system and then you're not going to have any state power, guess what happens? You are going to have state power. It's going to be the state power you just overthrew will be back in power in a quick minute. So the whole idea that you can do without a state, without state power, yes, you need a radically different kind of state power, but you need power to be able to lead masses of people and back them up in making all these transformations. What happens now when people go out? First of all, the state power, I'll just back up a second, will be radically different. You're not going to have a police force that murders people on a daily basis in order to maintain a system of oppression. The police forces, we will need police forces, we will need armed forces to defend the revolution. But these forces will be radically different. They will be the masses of people who have risen up to make the revolution in the first place. That's from whom the police and the armed forces will be drawn. And I've made this statement before. Some people say, "Whoa, wait a minute! You're going to take all these people out here running around right now, shooting each other and selling drugs, and you're going to give them state power?" I don't think so. I don't think I want to be part of that. No, we're not talking about people as they are now. We're talking about people. Go back to the question that Andy raised in a previous talk. Previous interview we were doing, people as they've been radically transformed, as they've radically transformed themselves on the basis of being struggled with in the course of transforming the world and making revolution. So then, the state power is going to be in the hands of masses of people who've been struggled with to be emancipators of humanity and to make a revolution on that basis. And, there's a lot of experience in the history of revolution, and particularly communist revolution, that we can draw from, that it is possible to transform people. Like when they made the revolution in China, for example, which took a different path, just to be clear, for anybody out there, just to be clear, was a revolution that in those particular circumstances was made by waging armed struggle from the very, very beginning. Armed struggle from the beginning and throughout. That was the character of the Chinese Revolution because of the particular character of Chinese society and the conditions that they were dealing with. Our revolution is different. It's a period of carrying out the three prepares through political and ideological work and, standing up and defending the people and fighting the power, but not attempting to wage an armed struggle until the conditions for that have been brought into being. That's where the three prepares come in. That's what we're working toward, but that's not what we're doing now. But there's still something to learn from the Chinese Revolution. You know, when Mao started up the People's War in China, the armed struggle against the existing oppressive government and the imperialists who were behind it, the U.S. and Britain in particular, he said, I went to the brave elements, what we might call the brothers and sisters on the street, you know, in our circumstances. He said, I went to them because they weren't afraid to die. But then a tremendous amount of struggle had to be waged. What's this about? What's this armed struggle for? This is not armed struggle to go out and rip off people. You know, they had to have points of attention, you know, to make sure that the people were adhering to the principles of the revolution and applying the principles of the revolution. You know, things like you don't take a needle or a thread from the masses of people. You don't go about, you know, this was mainly a male army at that time, although the masses of women did become involved. You don't go abusing women. You know, there are different principles here that had to do with the revolution that we're carrying out. And there was struggle, and you know, that's why they had to have those points of discipline and points of attention. So we're talking about masses of people who've been transformed through struggle and transforming themselves in order to bring about the revolution we're talking about and bring into being the necessary state power. But that state power, once established, will be completely different, radically different. The role of state power and whether it really serves the revolution to emancipate the masses of people or whether it actually constitutes another oppressive force over the masses of people is determined by the content of that state power, by the line, the politics and ideology and program that it's based on and that is leading it. That's how you know, and that's how the masses of people can be led to evaluate what's the character of this state power. Is this state power that's standing above the masses of people and turning into an oppressive force that's going to actually restore the old system of exploitation and oppression? Or is this a state power by its content, by its actions, by the way it's being led, by what it's fighting for, by what's guiding it, is actually backing up and supporting the masses of people in emancipating themselves and supporting the revolution throughout the world toward the same goal of emancipation, uprooting and eliminating all antagonistic conflicts among people, all forms of oppression and exploitation. But that's why state power, I mean, yes, I want us to have state power, not the three of us sitting here, but the masses of people who've risen up to make a revolution so that they can carry through what they fought for in that revolution. And yes, so that they can actually back up the masses of people in carrying out those transformations and prevent anyone from actually overthrowing the system that exists and re-enslaving the masses of people. So, you know, this is why state power, socialist state power, is a great thing to have. And it's something we should, you know, everyone who wants to see a more just world should be hungering for this state power, not, you know, worrying about what it'll be like. Yeah, there needs to be a struggle over what it's going to be like, you know, and that will be an ongoing struggle. But we should be primarily hungering for that state power because that's the power that will enable these transformations I'm talking about. Now, to be clear, since I said it will prevent people from overthrowing the socialist system, that doesn't mean that there won't be allowance for dissent. Doesn't mean that we don't need a lot of intellectual and cultural ferment. We do. That's all embodied in the Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America. You know, anyone who raises objections to what the government is doing or what the policies are, or even to the very existence of a socialist state, will be allowed to do so. And there will even be ways that criticism is encouraged and fostered and dissent, because you need that. You need to know what your shortcomings are. And the masses of people need to thrash out what's right and wrong, what will really lead to on the road of emancipation, and what, you know, even though it might say it's doing that, is actually leading back to the old way. So, you know, there'll be a flourishing and even a promotion of dissent. By that I mean even in the, you know, in the arts and the media and so on, provision made for people to have a vehicle to criticize and raise dissent, even while, you know, people who try to violently overthrow the new socialist system will be prevented from doing so. Oh, well, you're just like the people in power now. You know, that's what they say. You can dissent as long as you don't try to seriously challenge them. Well, no, we're not just like them. You know, for one thing, they don't encourage and promote dissent. They limit dissent within a very narrow sphere. But second of all,
once again, we're back to what's the nature, what's the character of that state power? And the reason we're not like them is because what the state power is for, what it concretely does, what it supports the masses of people in doing, what philosophy or ideology, what program, what politics, what social relations, it's all embodying and promoting, which are the complete and direct opposite of what exists under this system. So no, we're not just like them at all. We're radically different.
It's something terrible or something truly emancipating. Bob Avakian said the following: many people, including someone like Martin Luther King, have argued that attempting to carry out the revolution to overthrow this system is suicidal, particularly for black people in this country. When in fact, black people and masses of other oppressed and exploited people profoundly and desperately need this revolution. The reality is that such a revolution can succeed. But this is possible, particularly up against powerful ruling forces, like in this country, only in rare times and circumstances. And here is a very important truth. This is one of those rare times and circumstances. So the question I would like you to speak to was spoken to in parts of what we just saw. And but also I'd like you to draw on other parts of the interview where he gets into this, and if there's anywhere else where this question of how could you really do this, and what is so special about this time, and what do we have to do?
Well, one major thing I would recommend is the work that you just quoted from, which is called, it's on revcom.us, the website, Something Terrible or Something Truly Emancipating. And the full title of this talk by Bob Avakian is called Profound Crisis, Deepening Divisions, the Looming Possibility of Civil War, and the Revolution We Need. A basic foundation and a roadmap for revolution. And the full subtitle is important because it describes in broad strokes the moment that we're in. And so people should read it, we need to study it, we need to spread it, and act on the roadmap that he laid out. But in short, what I would say is, look, a revolution, we need a revolution in this society, the overthrow of this system, the dismantling and defeat of the ruling powers, the institutions of their violent repression, their police, their military, their laws, their court, the replacing of the US Constitution, which is and has always been an exploiter's vision of freedom. It cannot lead to a better world, and replacing it with the Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America. Thank you. I asked her to get me these things, and I really thank you for bringing them. This one, that Bob Avakian wrote, this Constitution. So a revolution it's not a little, B.A. talked about this, but as I said in my question to him, people use that word all the time. The revolution is the overthrow of this system and the replacing it with a different system. New police forces, new military, new relations with the world, new economy, new social system, new laws, all of this. That is a huge and very challenging thing to do. And a lot of people, for good reason, have said, as MLK said in that quote, well, this would be suicide. It's the most powerful empire that's ever existed. And I think the answer that Bob Avakian gives there, first of all, he says, it's suicide to let this system keep going on, let's be honest. You know, MLK said it's suicide for black people to make revolution. There will be repression, there will be devastation this system brings down on those who rise up. But look what it's doing to our planet now. Look what it's doing to black people now with the millions in prison and in and out of prison with no future. Look what it's doing to the environment on the verge of destruction. Look at the threat of World War III and nuclear annihilation that is getting closer by the day, whether between US and Russia or US and China, and now the genocide unfolding in Gaza that could spin out to wider war. We are in it's like playing with fire and worse, letting this system go on another day. So first of all, you need a revolution. So it's a wrong calculus to say making revolution is suicide. Living under this system is risking humanity's existence. But then he goes on and says revolution is possible, but it's not possible all the time. There are rare circumstances that can come about, and we are in such a time. And in this talk he goes through, and in the interviews he brings this alive, that making a revolution, there are conditions that come together that make it more possible, even in a society as powerful as this one. And one is a crisis among the rulers so deep and profound that they cannot rule and hold the society together in the same way that millions and millions have been conditioned to accept as legitimate. And you see that happening now. You see that with the Republican Party, and he talked about it in some of this interview, where they have completely not only abandoned the legitimating norms of this society, but are outright attacking them. The quote-unquote peaceful transfer of power is out the window. They say no election that they lose is legitimate. And they're prepared to back that up with violence. January 6th, exactly. And it's gotten they've gone further since then. So they are not going to be bound by the way this system has been held together. And when that starts to split apart, the idea that this setup is permanent, that the way things have been is the only way they ever could be, that starts to break down in the minds of millions. Now that doesn't go anywhere good on its own, but there are two more conditions that BA talks about in this piece. He says, a revolutionary people in their millions who have broken their allegiance to this system and whose desire for a profound and fundamental change is greater than their fear of what this system will bring down on them, than the repression. And the third is a revolutionary vanguard force, an organized leadership with a strategy, the leadership, and deep ties to the masses of people to lead them to seize that opportunity to make a revolution. And we are not yet in a situation where all three of those conditions exist. But the first one is very, very far along. And that is happening, and it provides not only the heightened urgency to make this revolution, before these fascists consolidate power, before they bring us into World War, before, and I'm talking about World War from the Democrat mainstream side, both sides of these rulers are playing with humanity's future in dangerous ways. But so there's urgency, but there's also heightened possibility as the norms break down. There's greater danger, but also greater possibility, and that puts the onus on us, and it actually heightens the importance of us fighting to get these interviews out, fighting to get the youth who are caught up in killing each other right now and fighting each other out of that and into this revolution. BA says in these interviews, we have to put these youth and others on a mission to put this revolution on the map now. Make your life about that now, because this is a moment in which millions are going through shocks and changes all the time, and we can actually be growing and asserting an alternate pole and legit force, authority, that's attracting not just a few here and there, but whole sections of society leap after leap. We have to actually bust a move in a period like this. So there's more to be said that BA goes into. There's a tremendous amount of work he's done to bring this alive, but this is a unique time. And in these interviews, he said, you can't ask for more than a shot. And this is not a time to squander this opportunity. Those who rule over us are vulnerable. They're very powerful, profoundly dangerous, but they're vulnerable in a way they haven't been for generations, and we need to seize on that.
As I look at the world today, and as I see the importance of revolution, the possibility to end all the horrors, oppression, and suffering that's happening, I'm looking at people who are doing, though they have so many more people, looking at Palestine right now, as I'm sure all of us are familiar with. And it would seem to me that as a group that we are missing out on being able to be leaders when these things pop up, because strategic alliances were not made in advance, so that if anything of this sort does come up, that we've already made alliances for those things. One of the things I feel like is that we're behind. We're behind. I've always felt that. We know time is of the essence. We don't we say this is the opportune time to make revolution. But we understand that there's so few of us.
Captain, it's a very important point in terms of in this way. I appreciate your asking that, because speaking personally, and also I think speaking more broadly of our movement, what is going on, what is going down in Palestine, both in Gaza, really with very few precedents, high-tech weapons, 2,000-pound bombs dropped on residential areas, the leveling of an entire city, the evacuation, the Nakba, the catastrophe, where the State of Israel in its formation drove 700,000 people out of their homes. This is almost, I think at this point, 1.7 million people, I believe, maybe it's 1.3 million, but it have been driven from their homes, living under sheets, being bombed, because they say, well, there's some tunnels underneath, okay? This is unconscionable. And it is true what you're saying, that we have been standing too much to this, the revolutionary forces have been too much to the side of this movement and this injustice. And it's not the first time that's happened. All right? Now, what I'm going to look is there's nothing to be gained in a situation where revolution could be possible to bring about an emancipating world at a time when things are heading towards a fucking disaster, to mince words here. But how do we approach this struggle? How do we approach the 2020 Rising in response to the suffocation of George Floyd? What do people need from revolutionaries? The root of that word answers itself. They need revolution. That's what they need. I don't think that where there's alliances to be made in advance, they should be made, but alliances around what? We just heard Bob Avakian in that last question, which I wasn't even sure I was going to ask, and I figured he's going to say, well, it's a scientific approach, thank you very much, we're on the way. But he went and walked you through half a century and more of confronting outrage after outrage after outrage, joining struggle after struggle after struggle. He talked about that Vietnam War and millions of people in the streets. And ever since then, U.S. imperialism has been a force for peace in the world, right? Is that what happened? No. He talked about coming in political life around the civil rights movement, then the Black liberation movement. You want to know a fact? The New York City, and I remember when I grew up in New York City, there was a whole big struggle, in Ocean Hills, Brownsville, how segregated the schools were. Guess what? They're more segregated today. Black mayors, black police chief, black president, black attorney general, police force heavily minority. It's the system that underlies this. It's the system of capitalism, imperialism, and the white supremacy that's woven into it, the patriarchy that's woven into it, and too many of these forces that are out there, and at a certain point it included us too, are building broad united fronts that leave the system intact. Now, we need a united front around many different things. We need to be joining these struggles and supporting the struggle for a free Palestine. We have to join that struggle. But what we have to join it with is not uniting with a force that's going to keep this system at its worst together, not joining with dancing in the streets as that party for liberation and socialism. There's nothing to do with liberation, nothing to do with socialism. Dancing in the streets over the murder of children and elderly civilians. Dancing over revenge. taking hostages of children, and then say, well, whatever has been done to me is justified that I do to others. Now, I was raised, well, I guess like a lot of Jewish people in this country, raised somewhat secularly, but also as a Jewish person. And one thing that I took from that experience, you know, where relatives would talk about the Holocaust, and I have to say my family, they're not around anymore, but I'm sure they would, well, actually one is, but I don't want to digress too much, but they were like partisan for Israel. They really thought Israel was the salvation. But I can remember in 1967, and I was in high school having huge fights with my father. I said, you know, you said never again. But never again has to mean never again for everyone. And now I'm glad to see that there are groups out there that are taking that stand. There was some writers put up a statement on N+1. I signed that statement. I think others here maybe have as well. But saying that is a start, and we should be out there uniting with those people. Jews for Justice, Jews for Peace, Jewish Voices for Peace. Right? There's a couple of groups, and with some of the secular Palestinians. I had one on the show last week. I think it's two episodes ago. It's very interesting. He brought a lot of information to bear. His name is Sari Makdisi. Watch the show. We should be uniting with people, but we have to bring them revolution. If we are culpable in this, Israel is a outpost of
a watchdog and an attack dog for the U.S. empire.
This when you need a phrase that captures it, call 1-800-Raymond Latta. Okay, but no, this is right. This is U.S. imperialism. Millions of dollars of weapons every year, and Biden is standing with it. Why? Because he's a heartless thug? Well, actually, he is a thug. But that's not why. The reason why, and I'm coming to your question here, because it is a question of what do we do when we go to these protests? What do we have to bring to that movement? One, we have to oppose what our own government is doing, what U.S. imperialism is doing, and that's a system that we now have an opportunity to overthrow. And that is the main thing we need to be bringing to people. But I also say this, for the Palestinian people to be free, some of this new communism developed by Bob Avakian has to get into that movement. Otherwise, it's going to be more of the same. Do you know where the Hamas's program, ISIS's program, the Taliban's program, the Islamic, you know where they're headed towards? The Islamic Republic of Iran, instituted right there in Palestine, if they won with their ideology. And the great irony, while Israel is not a theocracy, it's an ethnocracy, with a lot of theocratic elements, you'll end up with a state of Israel. You'll end up with, well, only this is a state for just these people, never mind all these other people. We have to get beyond just seeing what's already been, just this, all the nationalism. Nationalism doesn't have that much of, countries that are oppressed by imperialism, we have to fight against and struggle against imperialism, okay? But for countries to be free, they need to make a revolution and break out of this system and set up a genuine socialist system. And while there were incredible socialist societies brought up in the 20th century, they did run up against limitations that have been solved by the new communism. So, to your question, I really feel you that we are too small and too outside these struggles. But coming from outside these struggles, we need to bring them the message and the understanding and then the organization to actually do what it would take to free Palestine and to free every other country. And a first great step would be making a revolution right here, as was said in the 60s, right here in the belly of the beast, to overthrow the system that is fueling all of this shit all over the world and go on to liberate people and give people the tools to liberate themselves in different countries around the world, including in Palestine.
Right. I'm very honored to have experienced all of this with you guys on the big screen here today. I first ran into the leadership and the work of Bob Avakian, or BA, more than 15 years ago, straight out of middle school. I was forced awake by the US's wars against Iraq and Afghanistan, and I was an inquisitive and, rebellious young person that was moved by what I was seeing around the world and by what I was seeing immediately in front of me growing up in East Oakland. I was searching for answers, looking for something totally different, and, still to this day, what haunts me are seeing the pictures of US soldiers torturing and humiliating and dehumanizing their victims in Abu Ghraib prisons. And those images still haunt me to this day and force me to search for deeper answers. And when I ran into Bob Avakian, BA, it was like finding an oasis in the desert of false ideas. And it was refreshing to actually run into BA. And, I just, what we witnessed here today and what we saw is BA's ability to be able to break down extremely complex ideas without watering them down. And in particular, the way that he pays special importance to breaking it down and to bringing revolution to what he called the basic people, the people at the bottom of society, those who have been denied education, who are stuck in superstition, who are harassed and brutalized day in and day out by the powers that be, or who are just trying to survive. The attention that he pays to actually breaking down this revolution to them and bringing to them. I myself personally am a product of BA's work at being able to do that. And instead of learning everything that I did, learning the communist theory, biology, world history, and cultures, all these things that I learned through Bob Avakian, that wasn't done as just some search for like an armchair intellectual, but instead BA continually challenged me to dedicate my life to the emancipation of all of humanity. And now, fast forward to today, where, crazy life, I'm working 10 to 12 hours a day with a full-time job, bills to pay, and all of that. I still contribute all of my spare time, my energy, and my resources to building this movement for revolution and to organizing people into it. I lead the Bay Area chapter of the Revolution Club here, and together with an awesome, but for now small team of committed revolutionaries, both young and old, we are fighting like hell to put this revolution on the map. And like he talked about in this clip, now is a time when revolution is actually more possible than ever. What's desperately needed is to connect this revolution and this leader to millions of people. And this benefit event helps us raise the funds to be able to do just that.
Take to heart what you just heard and donate generously today. Really putting this revolution on the map, as David just spoke about, requires serious money, and it requires your participation. So not only donate, we want to ask you to do more than that. We are right now in the middle of the holiday season. This is the time of year when people make about a quarter of all their donations that they make throughout the year. This is the time to take these interviews with Bob Avakian out to your friends and family, as well as out to farmers markets and street corners and public events. Spread the word of these interviews. Watch clips and sections of them together with others. Share this revolution and raise money as you do so. Ask people to donate. We need to together fight to get the resources to really put this revolution on the map. Also, we want to announce now that next week, on Thursday, December 7th, we will be dedicating the full episode of the RNL Show to showing the entire illustrated series that was adapted by our crew here at the RNL Show from a powerful article which first appeared at revcom.us in 2020 called Bob Avakian, for the Liberation of Black People and the Emancipation of All Humanity. We want to urge you to make plans now to gather people together to watch this episode together, especially in neighborhoods of the oppressed, as well as far beyond. Gather in the Revolution Club Center on the south side of Chicago, at Revolution Books up in Harlem, New York City, or out in Berkeley, California, or in cafes, or laundromats, or backyards, or living rooms, or classrooms, or wherever you can bring people together. This illustrated series became something of a short film, which takes you through the journey of Bob Avakian's development and life's mission, captured in this excerpt.
Why was I doing the work I was doing? Once again, we're back to for whom and for what. I wasn't doing this work for myself. When I was young, in middle school, and then even more so in high school, my life got changed in a very major way by coming into contact with people that I hadn't really known that much before, in particular Black people. I started learning about their situation and how that relates to what goes on in this society as a whole. I was drawn to the culture, not just the music and art overall, but the whole way of going through the world of the Black people who became my friends and the world they introduced me to. And I came to the point of recognizing these are my people. Now, I knew they had a different life experience than I did, but these are my people. I don't see a separation. It's not like they are some other people over there who are going through all this and somehow that's removed from me. These are my people. And then I began to recognize more deeply what people were being put through, the oppression they were constantly subjected to, the horrors of daily life, as well as the bigger ways in which the system came down on them. And as I went further through life and began to approach the question of what needs to be done about this, and was introduced to taking up a scientific approach to this, I realized that my people were more than this. I realized that my people were Chicanos and other Latinos, and other oppressed people in the US. They were people in Vietnam and China. They were women. They were the oppressed and exploited of the world. And through some struggle and having to cast off some wrong thinking, I've learned that they are LGBT people as well. These are my people, the oppressed and exploited people of the world. They are suffering terribly, and something has to be done about this. So it is necessary to dig in and systematically take up the science that can show the way to put an end to all this and bring something much better into being. You have to persevere and keep struggling to go forward in this way. And when you run into new problems or setbacks, you have to go more deeply into this rather than putting it aside and giving up. So this is why I've been doing the work I've been doing.
This journey includes Bob Avakian working closely with the Black Panther Party in their most revolutionary days, but also going further, summing up crucial lessons from that advanced experience, but also the challenges that remained, and propelling him to become the most important political thinker and leader in the world today, someone who Black people and all people need to get with and follow if you want to see an end to white supremacy and to all oppression and exploitation in every form that is built into this system here and around the world. Also, from this series is this from Bob Avakian.
There is the potential for something of unprecedented beauty to arise out of unspeakable ugliness. Black people playing a crucial role in putting an end, at long last, to this system which has, for so long, not just exploited, but dehumanized, terrorized, and tormented them in 1,000 ways. Putting an end to this in the only way it can be done, by fighting to emancipate humanity, to put an end to the long night in which human society has been divided into masters and slaves, and the masses of humanity have been lashed, beaten, raped, slaughtered, shackled, and shrouded in ignorance and misery.
You really do not want to miss, and cannot afford to let others miss, next week's special episode on December 7th of this show that will not only bring you further into the life and revolutionary development of this unique revolutionary leader, Bob Avakian, but will also bring to you further the role that you can play and need to play as a follower of Bob Avakian and a fighter yourself for the liberation of Black people and the emancipation of all of humanity. Okay, so this brings us to the end of this, our 176th episode of the RNL, the Revolution Nothing Less Show. I want to give a shout out to our new Patreons who joined in the last week, and I want to urge all of you, if you are not yet a regular financial supporter of this show, if you're not part of our Patreon community, please change that today. You can sign up on the website, patreon.com/therevcoms at whatever level fits your budget, $3 a month, $10 a month, $25 a month, and you will be part of ensuring that this revolutionary lifeline and show not only continues to get put out, but spreads. So we really want to urge you to do that. And we want to let you know that if you are a Patreon or become one in the next few days, you will get early access and special access to more of the Q&A talkbacks that I did following the Bob Avakian interviews in Chicago at the big screening there, and of Andy in New York just a couple nights ago, which was a really, really powerful talkback that he did. So definitely sign up if you're not yet. Also, don't forget to go out and raise money in this holiday season. Ask your friends, family, spread the Bob Avakian interviews, ask them to donate, be part of helping us fuel spreading this throughout society. And finally, I want to remind you, next week, gather your friends, gather family, host public screenings if you can of this special episode of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less Show, where we will be sharing the entire illustrated series put together as a short film of Bob Avakian for the liberation of Black people and the emancipation of all of humanity. So with that, I want to give a shout out to Andy. We missed you this week. We can't wait to have you back, but we were glad that you're out on the road. Thanks to the whole crew here at the RNL Revolution Nothing Less studio. And we'll see you back next week.